Welcome back to another construct video, and in this video we're going to be looking at platform enemies. Now, if you ask anybody what the easiest game to make in Construct 3, they'll say a platform game. However, despite the loads of tutorials there are to make your own platform games and add lots of stuff into your platform games, there's very little tutorials on how to add enemies. So today I thought I'd change that and have a look at recreating some classic Mario enemies. So let's get started. Our first enemy we're going to start with is the Humble Spike, and the main reason I picked this one first is it sets the groundwork for some of the basics that you'll need for each of your enemies. So first thing I'm going to do is actually right click and edit, because one of the biggest things you need to know about enemies is hitboxes. Hitboxes are a very good thing to get used to. Now we can just move any of these points. We can also right click and get Construct to guess the shape for us. But my main rule with hitboxes is be generous to your player. It doesn't matter if your hitbox is perfect or not, as long as it doesn't seem unfair. So all I'm going to do for this hitbox is just bring everything in. Yes, it means they're going to miss some of these edges. They're not going to land in these gaps here, because they've landed in these gaps here, they've hit these edges here. And again, I'm being generous to our player because we always want the player to think the game is fair. So once I've got that, I'm going to hit X. I'm then going to go to my event sheet, and all I'm going to do is add an event and just say if Mario is overlapping another object, we're going to go down to our spike, hit done, and then we're just going to add one more action, system, and for this I'm just going to restart layout. I think I'm going to do a video in the future of how to handle health in lots of different ways, but for today we're focusing on the enemies, not on the health, so we're just going to restart layout. If we press play, we can go over to our spike. If we hit it, we die, but we can also jump over it. And this is a really simple thing you can add into your game. It doesn't need to be a spike, but just something that if you touch, you die. Let's move on to our more classic Mario enemies then, starting with the Goomba. Again, first thing I'm going to do is once I've got an object in place, I need to actually make sure this hitbox is fair. So again, you can do this by guessing the polygon shape, which I think is quite nice. I'm going to keep it as that, or again, you can just play around and move this yourself. If you need to create more points, by the way, you can just double tap and it'll create another point for you. Once you're happy, you can hit the X. Next, we need to give our Goomba a behavior. So we're going to add a brand new behavior, and we're going to scroll down, and this is going to be the platform behavior. Once we've got the platform behavior in place, we can change any of the instance variables. So for instance, max speed, I'm going to load to 200. But the main thing that we need to change is the default controls. Just needs to be ticked off, so we can't move the Goomba ourselves. Next, we're going to add an instance variable. And this is going to keep track of if it's moving left or right. So I'm just going to call it moving left. And this is going to be a Boolean. And it doesn't matter which one you set it to, basically which direction do you want to start? Do you want it to start moving left or right? I'm going to make it move left to begin with. Once we've got that, we can now move to our event sheet. So our first event is really simple. We're just going to check that Boolean. So we're going to do Goomba, scroll down, is Boolean set, moving left, and if it's moving left, then all we're going to do is go to the platform behavior, simulate control, and control it to go left. We can then take this whole line of code, copy and paste it. I'm going to start by inverting this. So instead of moving left, it's now moving right. And instead of simulating control left, we're going to simulate control right. So that says up left and right, but we need to actually make sure it can change between these two options now. So the way we do this is we add an event, we check the Goomba, and we scroll down, and we want this overlapping at offset. So instead of checking if we're overlapping the hitbox, what we do is we move the hitbox across by a certain number of pixels and then do the check that way. That way we can check actually if we're next to a wall. And for the first one, we want the offset of 1x, and then we select our block. Now for mine, if we look back at my layout, you see I've got two different blocks either side. I've got the bricks, and I've got this more classical square Mario look. So I need to check both of these. So the way we do that is we can actually click on the edge here, right click and make this an OR block. This means we can add another condition. So if you're overlapping this block or this block, and obviously we just changed the block to our second one. So now I can check both of them. So if we are overlapping the block with the offset of 1, what we can do is we go to our Goomba, we can scroll down, and we want to set the boolean moving left to true. We can then copy and paste this code again, and all we're going to do is change this from a 1 to a -1. And this is checking the other side now. This is checking if we've got a block on the other side of our Goomba, and if we have, we now need to set this to false, so we move right. So let's do a test of this. And we see our Goomba moving back and forth. Now, if your Goomba is displaying some strange behaviors, it might be that you just need to change your hitboxes. So try and have a flat edge for your left and right. That can fix it. This one actually, I've just reset the bounding box to fix the issue that I was having. But the next issue that we've got is it doesn't kill us. We also want to be able to bounce off the Goomba because that is obviously very classic Mario. So let's implement those two mechanics now. Starting with killing Mario, we can just add our own line of code, and it is basically copy and paste of this, but changing the spike. However, if you're on the free version of Construct, you probably want to save as many events as possible. So we can do what we've just done before. We can make this an OR block, copy and paste this line of code, and just change spike to Goomba. And that just saves you one event, and across all our enemies we look at today, that could save you 5 or 6 events. So it can be very, very useful. Now we just need to get the bouncing off the head, and it's going to use some familiar mechanics that we've used already. We're going to add an event to Mario this time. We're going to do overlapping at offset. Now we're not caring about the X, we only care about the Y, and we want to check if Mario is 10 pixels above the Goomba. Now you can adjust these values, but if it's too low, then it will trigger the overlapping and it will kill Mario. So 10 I found about right, but you could definitely get away with a little bit lower. But if we are 10 pixels above the Goomba, all we're going to do is first of all take the Goomba and destroy it. And then secondly, we need to make Mario jump in the air. And the way that we do this is we take Mario, we scroll down until we get to the platform behaviors. We want to set vector Y, and we're going to set it to -500. And what this will do, it will shift us up with a ton of momentum into the air. So let's do a test. So I go over, I bounce, and I get a little jump. Obviously, we can check if we die as well by just standing next to it. So we've got an option of what we want to do, and you can adjust that -500. The bigger the minus number, the higher your bounce in the air. But let's move on to our second enemy. Next enemy we're going to add is the Power Trooper. Now these are fantastic to combo a load of them together, and all they're going to do is float up and down in a pattern, so you can try and time your jump. Now in order to get that pattern, it's really, really simple. We're just going to add a behavior, and the behavior that we're going to add is the sign behavior. Now this behavior works so much better on the premium version of Construct, but you can still make do on the free version. It just means you've got to do a bit more trial and error. So if I preview, you can see that it's moving left and right. Now I don't want it to move left and right, I want the up and down variation. But again, if you do want them to move left and right, you can obviously just change this. So I am going to set this to be vertical. Now it's about playing around with the two main factors being period and magnitude. Magnitude is the total number of pixels it will cover. So at the moment it's covering 50 pixels. And the period is how long it takes to do a full rotation. So it'll be up, down, back up in 4 seconds. So I'm going to change this to 50. I'm going to change this to be about 75. And because I'm on the premium version, I can hit all of them and just hit preview. And oh, I've not changed all of them. So big tip when you're dealing with multiple objects, if you click on the left side, you can change all the settings. If you click on just one object, you can just change one of the objects. But once we change those final ones, we can preview once again, and we can see them moving up and down. So it'll be my job to try and time my jump to try and jump on all of them. Now one thing you can do, if I just unpreview these, one thing you can do is you can set a period offset. Now what this means is when I preview them all, this one will actually start in the opposite direction because it's half the period. So it's a small delay essentially. So if we play it, you can see now that it's doing the opposite of what they're doing. So this can also create some really tricky and difficult patterns for your character. Let's move on to the event sheet now. Now, the event sheet, we don't actually have to add hardly any code. The first thing we need to do is check if Mario is touching the Power Trooper, which we can do by just adding in an extra condition here. So I'm just going to move this down to our paratrooper, and that's done. And then we also need to check if Mario is jumping on the head of the paratrooper. And funny enough, we've got a line of code that does just that. Now, unlike what I've done before, I've clicked on each of the different actions. I'm going to do a shortcut where I right click, replace object, and change any mention of Goomba with paratrooper. And that just saves me a little bit of time. Now, you might be wondering why we can't use the OR trick that we did before, because it's doing the same action. It's just because we're checking, it's just because we're destroying two different types of enemies. If we had the OR block and we jumped on a paratrooper, it would actually destroy all Goombas. So this is why we've had to separate these two lines of code. But let's do a test. And we can see that we can bounce off them. Now, obviously we can adjust the height bounce, so it's a little bit more satisfying. And if we hit the side of them, obviously we die as well. Before we continue our next enemy, one thing we could add at this point is just a global variable. So I'm going to right click, add a global variable, and we're just going to put bounce heights. And I'm just going to set this to 500. And then where we've got these minus 500s here, all I'm going to do is write negative bounce height. And this just means now that we've got a variable that allows us to change how high we bounce, because as we add more enemies, there's going to be a lot more bouncing going on, and it's going to change it in lots of places. We now have a single variable that we can change. Right, let's move on to our next enemy. Next, let's try and tackle one of my favourite enemies in Mario, Bullet Bill. Now, instead of getting this just to spawn randomly on screen, which you can do as well by just placing it, we are going to get it to work from a launcher, because I think that's just a little bit cooler. So, starting with the launcher, we just need to edit one thing on its animations. We're going to go to the image points, right click to add a new image point, and we want to put one where the bullet bills are going to fire from. So in this case, it's center of the cannon. Next, we're going to go to our bullet, and we're going to right click, add a new behavior, and you've probably guessed it, we're adding the bullet behavior. Now, you can change all of your different options here of what you want your bullets to do. Main one you're going to change probably is speed, how fast it is. Once you're happy with your bullet, take it to the top of the screen and put it out of the way. Or if you've got an object repository, you can put it in there as well. But there is going to be absolutely fine for our needs. So now we've got that all set up, and remember to adjust your hitboxes for definitely the bullet bill if you haven't. Final behavior you're going to add before I forget is just for our build launcher. We can actually give it the solid behavior because it does act as a solid object in our world, so we can just put it like that. But once we've got that done, we can then move to our event sheet. So step one, we're going to add a brand new event. We're going to go to system. I'm going to scroll down to see this for each option. And we want to do this for each of our bullet spawners. Now, if you've only got one spawner, you can skip this step. However, it's always nice to add this code in. Then you've always got the option to add more spawners into your level. Next, we're going to right click on this green arrow, and we're going to add in a sub event. We're going to go to Mario this time. We're going to scroll down, and we want to compare Mario's X position. We want to see if it is less than the build spawner .x. If it's less than the build spawner, it means we're on the left side of the spawner. So all we're going to do is right click, and we're going to add one more condition, system, and then we're going to add every X seconds. And this is how often your cannon is going to fire. So in my case, it's going to fire every second. Then we can add an action, and we can get our spawner to spawn a brand new cannon. So we can do this by scrolling down to spawn another object. We're going to click on our bullet bill. Make sure the image point is set to 1. That means it's going to fire from the position that we set, not from the base of the cannon. And then because it's on the left side, we actually have to do a couple more things. So the next thing we have to do is we take our bullet bill, and there's one called set angle of motion, which if I scroll down, there we go, set angle of motion. And we set this to 180, so it fires in the opposite direction. By default, it fires at angle 0. We need to fire at 180. And the final thing we need to do with our bullet bill is we actually need to flip when it's going to the left. If we don't flip it, it's going to be upside down. So I'm just going to set it to be flipped. Once we've done with the left side, we can repeat from the right side, which is just a copy and paste. The only difference is instead of the less than, we can do greater than and equal to, just in case you're at the exact same position as the cannon. It will fire still, it will just take the right side. Again, very rarely that's going to actually happen. And then all we need to do is actually delete these 2 lines of code because they're done by default for us. So that is it for our spawning. So now we should have that spawning each side. So let's give that a test. So you can see our bullet bills are firing. They're a little bit quick, so we could change that 1 second to be a little bit slower. Our cannon we can stand on, and there we go. It's now firing to the right, to the left, to the right, to the left. So this creates quite a tricky enemy for Mario to deal with. There's 2 main issues that we need to deal with then. First of all, we can't die. We also want to be able to jump on the bullet, so I'm going to slow these down and slow the timing down. And actually a third issue is the walls. It's going through the walls. We don't want to do this. We want it to destroy itself if it hits another solid object. So let's quickly fix these now. Starting with the speed, I'm just going to go up to my bullet bill and just adjust the speed down to 200. I'm going to go back to my event sheet, and then instead of every 1 second, every 2 seconds. And what we could do with this as well, and let's do this while we're here, is just set up a bullet timer, and I'm going to set it to 2 seconds. And instead of saying every 2 seconds, we'll just make use of our bullet timer. And again, this just means that we can change it at the top instead of having to hunt through all our code to change it in 2 different places. Now our bullets have slowed down, we can actually check if we can jump on it. And we're going to take our paratrooper code, which is our Goomba code, and copy and paste it, right click at the side, replace object, and any mention of paratrooper is now bullet bill. Nice and simple there. Next we need to kill Mario, and you've guessed it, we can come to the top here and just change our code that we did before. And all done. And then finally we just need to do a check to see if our bullet bill needs to be destroyed because it's hit a wall. And this one really not too bad, just going to add an action, bullet bill, scroll down, and we've got this on collision with another object. The other object is going to be our block. And then we can take our bullets and destroy it. Now obviously you might have multiple different blocks in the game, so just right click on the green arrow, change to an all block, and then just repeat for each of the different blocks in your game. For mine, I'm just going to do this for the bill spawner because that's a solid object as well, so if there's another bill spawner it might hit that. And I'll do it for block 3 because they're my most common blocks I have in my level. You could also handle this with a family. If you've used families before, that would make life much easier. So just group all your boxes. So just group all your solid objects into a family and then just have 1 bit of code. But that is it for our bullet bill. Let's move on to our next enemy. So for our next one, we're going to actually do a bit of changes to our bullet bill and add a second variation. Now, if somebody's looking at the screen going, are we just doing a faster version? Obviously that would be a little bit too easy because we could just change the speed. I actually want to do a homing missile instead. So in order to do this, you'll need a second spawner if you want this to come from a spawner. You'd also need a second bullet bill. So you can see these are separate objects. They're exactly the same at the moment, but we're going to make some slight changes into our event sheet. So for our event sheet, what we're actually going to do is take all of our code to do with our bullet bill, and we're going to have to copy all of it. Next, we're going to right click while it's still highlighted, and we're going to replace object, and we're going to replace all bill spawners with bill spawner 2. And then we're going to do the second thing again. We're going to right click, replace object, any mention of bullet bill with bullet bill 2. So all of that is exactly the same. Nothing has changed just yet. What we need to do is add in one more action to fix this so it now homes onto Mario instead. And the way we do this is we just add a new event, system, every tick, and then we want to go to our bullet bill 2 and then rotate towards position. Now the number of degrees depends on how strict you want this to be. If you've got a very high degree, and when I say high degree, even 10 is quite powerful, it's going to be able to lock onto Mario really easily. I actually prefer it being only 1 or 2, and that way it will get near the area, but it might miss a lot. So it still adds that level of challenge, but it's not going to instantly hit Mario. It's just another annoyance in the way. Second part's nice and easy. Mario X, Mario Y. And that is it kind of set up, but there is one more change that I want to make to this. And because these are quite powerful, I don't want loads of them on the screen. It's not too bad of our bullet bill because they're going in a straight line. With these, they're going to be homing onto Mario, so they're going to be really annoying. So the way we're going to fix this is limit it to just 2 on the screen at a time. And the way we do this is we're going to go up to this bit of code here. So this is below R for each spawner 2. We've got our check for left and right. We're going to go to the one that says every bullet timer. We're going to add another condition. System, compare 2 variables. I'm going to take bullet2 dot count. This will count how many are currently on the screen. And we want to check if that is less than or equal to 2. If it is less than or equal to 2, you can spawn another one. And we're just going to copy and paste this and do the same for just the line underneath. And that just puts a cap on there, so we can only have so many on the screen at a time. Finally, the only thing we haven't done is make it kill Mario, so just come to the top and again just right click replace object. And I've just done a test and I've spotted a slight major issue with both of these. Also, we're checking if the bullet bill collides with its own spawner. This is going to be a problem because it hits its own spawner every single time it spawns, so it's just going to delete it. So easiest thing you can really do is just delete this code. You can do a check to basically say once it's spawned, start a small timer. After that time has expired, then it can hit its own block. I'm not going to go into that detail today, but we'll get rid of that today. And let's do an actual test now. So you can see here is a couple of different ones. I can bounce off them. They can hit me as well, so you can still die from these. But they do create this fun level of challenge, and I'm very curious to see if I can bounce off 2 of them. I don't think I will be able to. There we go. So nice trick shot there. So really cool mechanic. Obviously you can see a little bit of a bug if it hits me just like that at the very start, but that's not a problem because most of the time when you're moving it's not bugging, so hopefully that won't be something that you see too often. Now we come to our second last enemy of the day, and this one's a really great one. It's going to be the Firebar. Now some of you are probably thinking, well, that's really easy to create, and well, it is, but I'm going to show you a slightly different method of creating it that you might find really useful. So I'm going to right click, insert new object, and this time we're going to go for a tiled background, and we'll call it Firebar. Click anywhere, and I'm going to import this little flame that I've got. And I'm going to resize it down to the size of 16 by 16, or in my case I can just hit crop because that's what size it is. So once I've done that, I've now got my Firebars. Now you can see that the way tile background goes, it's just going to repeat the pattern. So I'm going to resize this to be a 16 gap, just like so, and I can make this as long as I want now. So when it comes to my Firebars in the game, I can actually just resize this to whatever size firebar that I want. I can then take a block that I've already got and place it as the center of the firebar. And that does most of the work for us. Now, one thing that we do need to fix actually is the origin point, because it's in the top left. There's no image point in tile background. Instead, you have a set number that you can pick from, and you find them by going to the left side and looking for origin. And we're just going to set this to be left. This put it in line with stuff like our block. We can hide it behind now, and actually we're going to use the block that we normally use for this, which is this one here, I'm pretty sure. And I'm just going to resize that to make it a little bit bigger. And our firebar is pretty much nearly complete now. The only thing that we need to add left is the rotation behavior. So I'm going to go to behaviors, scroll down till we see rotate, and that is it. I now have a working firebar. And the only thing that's missing is to kill Mario if Mario touches it. And if you've not guessed already, the way we're going to do that is copy and paste in this first line of code and changing our bullet bill to be our firebar. And that is it. Let's do a test. And this looks like every troll level I've ever played in Mario Maker 2, but you can see it does work. Now we're going to finish off with the enemy that's caused me the most problem today, being the Fromp. Now, this is a very classic enemy. You stand underneath it, it tries to crush you, and then it slowly makes its way back to the start again, and we repeat the process. So to get this one working, we need to set up a couple of things. First one is behaviors. Now, this is going to require 2 behaviors. The first one being the bullet behavior, which is going to control the movement down. And then the second behavior being the tween behavior, and this can control the movement going up the way. We also need to add an instance variable as well, and this is just going to be the start Y position, so when it hovers back up, we know exactly where it's going to. So that's everything you need to get started. As always, you can customize any of the properties on the left here, but let's get started on the event sheet. So first we need to do is add an on start of layouts. And it's going to do two things. First thing we need to do for our font is we need to get the bullet behavior off as quickly as possible. So we're just going to set enabled and disable it. Second thing we need to do is record its starting position. So we're going to scroll down, set value of starting Y to font.y. So that's it for the on start of layout stuff. Now we need to get the behavior working of it crashing down. Now we need to use system for this first because we need to check for each font. Separately. So once we've got our font selected, we can then right click at the sides and add in a sub event. We'll go back to system for this because we're going to set up a small calculation. So we're going to compare two values and we're going to use something called ABS or absolute value. Essentially, if you don't know what this is where you do any calculation, it always returns the positive value. So even if you got the value of -4, it would return 4. And it's really useful because what we're going to do is we're going to compare font.x take away Mario.x and get the absolute value back. This will basically tell us how close we are to the center of the font from our character. And if it is less than, and then this is up to you. Now the way I normally do this is doing the font's width and just times it by 2. So that gives you 16 blocks either side of the font. The font is 32 blocks. If you are in that range, it's going to crash down. So if you are underneath the font in that small range, what we can do is make it crash down on top of you. So we're going to go to font. We're going to scroll down to our bullet behavior, and the first thing we're going to do is enable it. Then we're going to go back to our font and we need to actually make sure it goes in the right direction. So we're just going to set angle of motion. I'm going to set this to 90 degrees. Now one thing I forgot to do on this tutorial here is if we just click back on our font, it's really important that you set angle off. If you don't do this, your font is going to turn sideways. It's going to look very, very silly. So just make sure this set angle is off. Now we also need to check if our font hits anything. So as soon as it hits a block, it's going to go back up. So for this, we're going to click back on our green circle, right click, and we're going to add in a new sub event. And for this one, we're going to say font, scroll down, and on collision with another object. And this time we're going to choose our block. Now I believe I'm using this block. However, we can also just right click, make this an all block, and we can cover all of our bases by adding all the different solid blocks it could possibly hit. Now, if it does hit a block, we need to do a couple of things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take that bullet behavior and just stop it. It no longer needs to be active, so we're going to stop it dead in its tracks so our font no longer moves. Next, we're going to add a new behavior and we're going to take our tween property. So scroll down until you see tween 1 property, and we're going to tween on just the Y. You can add a tag for this, but I'm going to keep it blank. It's the only thing I've got a tween on. And then the end value is going to be font dot, and then we want start Y, so it's starting position. Now times how long it takes to reset. I'm going to set this to 2 seconds. Now if you've got a font that falls quite far, you may not want it to get back up after 2 seconds. You might want it to move up at a steady pace. So you may need to do some sort of calculation based on your distance between the start Y and your current position. I'm going to keep it really simple today. Just do 2 seconds. Final thing we just need to be careful of then is these two bits of code triggering at the same time. So the way we fix that is just by right clicking, adding another condition to our font, and we go down till we get to our tween properties, and we've got this one called is playing, and we've got an empty tag just like we've got for our tween property, and we're just going to invert this. So I go over to the font. When I get close to it, it should pop down, and then it's going to go back up. So really, really simple bit of code there. And again, you can add in the final bits of code that we've used so far today. So first of all, if we're on collision with a thwomp, we want it to kill Mario. And you can also take the code from the Goomba, the Paratrooper, the Bullet Bill to make it so you can bounce off the top of it like newer style Mario games, you can bounce on top of the thwomps, so you can bait it down and then jump on top of it, but I'll leave that decision up to you. But that is it for today's video. If you enjoyed this, you may want to check out Patreon, where we're looking at 5 more Mario enemies, some of the more wacky ones you might find in platformer games. But please do have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next video.